Dad abandoned me so he could become the perfect dad to his beloved stepdaughter. But now he's stunned because I moved out, and he didn't even realize it until Grandma completely ripped into him. My father consistently puts my stepsister before me, and it all began when she entered his life at his weakest moment, right after losing my stepmom, his new wife, in a tragic accident. Yes, my stepmom had a daughter from her previous relationship. After that tragedy, my father practically built his whole existence around Stacy. But here's the kicker. I recently broke my leg. Total accident. Yet here I am, shivering on a stiff hospital bed, staring at an empty doorway because Dad couldn't bother to show up. Instead, he's preoccupied comforting Stacy. Well, guess what, Dad? Two can play this game. I told Grandma everything, and we all know how she has Dad wrapped around her finger. You know those moments when you're stuck in a hospital bed, gazing blankly at a sterile ceiling, wondering how life became this screwed up? That's me right now. Perhaps it's just the heavy medication talking, or maybe it's the crushing realization that the one person I needed, my dad, has ditched me yet again. But the worst part isn't the pain or the cold hospital room. It's knowing that I'm lying here alone while he's busy pretending to be father of the year to my selfish stepsister Stacy. Let me back up a bit and fill you in. My name is Denise. I'm 21 years old, in college, and currently feeling lost, trying to figure out how I'll make it through this chaos. How did I even end up here? Well, last week, I didn't notice the car speeding toward me as I crossed the street. 1 second, I was just walking home after class. The next, I was sprawled on the asphalt, my leg bent in ways legs definitely shouldn't bend. It wasn't my fault either. A reckless driver ran a red light, leaving me in the hospital dealing with physical pain and emotional turmoil that's tearing me apart. Right after the accident, the first person I wanted by my side was my dad. I wasn't asking for anything extraordinary, just for him to come to the hospital and offer some comfort, to make me feel less alone and scared. But when I called, he fed me the same tired excuse he's used countless times before. He couldn't make it because of Stacy. Apparently, he was scheduled to join her on some mental peace retreat, a trip he'd already half paid for. You would think that Stacy, a grown adult at 23, could handle things by herself. But no, my father insists she needs him. And what about me? His actual daughter, lying injured in a hospital bed, is expected to just cope? Every time he chooses Stacy over me, the disappointment cuts deeper, never dulling or becoming easier to bear. I keep foolishly hoping he'll finally choose me first, but every single time, he proves me wrong. But honestly, the absolute worst part is that I genuinely need his support right now. Not just emotionally, but financially too. Hospitals aren't exactly handing out free stays, and as a college student, my bank account isn't exactly thriving. So I swallowed my pride and asked him if he could lend me some money, just enough to cover the hospital bills. And can you guess his reply? He told me he'd already budgeted everything for Stacy's precious mental health retreat, covering both travel costs and remaining fees. Then he had the nerve to lecture me about how crucial this retreat was for Stacy's mental peace, insisting I should understand that she needs this more than I do. Great. Another chapter of Stacy's endless saga of mental health. While we're on this topic, let me give you some insight into Stacy's little act. Ever since she stepped foot into our family, she's perfected the art of staging panic attacks to manipulate Dad into bending to her every whim. Whenever I'm about to bring something important up, she miraculously breaks down, cueing Dad to rush in and rescue her like she's the star of his universe. It's maddening. And now, when I'm lying here, genuinely needing him, he's busy being her knight in shining armor, again. Looking back, I shouldn't even be surprised. Dad has always been this way, especially after he married my stepmom, Claudia. Things weren't always like this, though. There was a time when our family wasn't fractured. But that was before my mother got sick. Let me fill you in on our messed up family history so you can fully grasp why all this hurts so damn much. My parents' marriage wasn't even based on love. It was arranged by Grandma Jean, the powerhouse matriarch who basically runs our family. Dad never truly loved Mom, at least not in the way a husband should. He went along with the arrangement simply to avoid upsetting Grandma, who's filthy rich and basically funds Dad's entire existence. My father has never even had a stable job. He's been coasting along comfortably on Grandma's money for years. Classic entitlement, right? Everything went downhill when Mom got sick. Dad became distant, rarely around, and emotionally unavailable when he was home. Soon enough, he started seeing Claudia behind Mom's back, and by the time my mother passed away, Claudia was already pregnant. It still cuts deep knowing my mom was fighting for every breath, while Dad had already moved on with someone new. He didn't even bother waiting out of respect. Barely a month after my mom's death, Dad married Claudia officially, signing the papers like Mom had never mattered at all. But sometimes, the universe has a twisted sense of justice. Claudia's pregnancy had severe complications, and tragically, both she and her unborn child passed away during childbirth. This left Dad alone with Stacy, Claudia's daughter from her previous relationship. That was when everything truly fell apart for me. Stacy suddenly became Dad's new reason for living, his shot at redemption. He began treating her like some delicate, wounded bird, constantly showering her with attention and care, while completely forgetting I even existed. Stacy quickly mastered the role of the perpetual victim, conveniently pulling the anxiety card every time things didn't go her way, and Dad fell for it every single time. Whenever I confronted him, he'd dismiss my concerns, claiming I was too harsh or unable to grasp Stacy's struggles. But honestly, I couldn't care less about her issues. All I know is that since the day she walked into our lives, I felt invisible, cast aside like a broken toy nobody wants anymore. Whenever I try to speak up, Stacy twists the situation, somehow turning herself into the victim, making Dad believe she's the one truly suffering. Even Grandma Jean has seen right through her games. Grandma never approved of Claudia or her daughter, Stacy, in the first place. After Mom died, she merely tolerated the situation out of sympathy for Dad, but she always saw Stacy as an outsider who thrived on manipulation. Grandma tried countless times to get through to Dad, reminding him that I'm his actual daughter and I deserve better. But Dad refused to listen. He's too busy playing hero for poor Stacy to realize just how badly he's hurting me. Now, stuck in this cold, lonely hospital room, I feel more isolated than ever. My leg is immobilized in a cast, the bills keep piling up, and the one person who's supposed to stand by me is nowhere to be found. How did I let things get this bad? I try not to replay the accident in my head, but it's difficult. I've always prided myself on being independent and handling things alone, but this situation is different. Right now, I need support. It's an awful feeling when you realize that the person who should have your back doesn't care enough to show up. Sure, I have friends, but they have their own lives and their own challenges to deal with. Even worse is the reality that my finances are rapidly running dry. I've been managing college and living expenses entirely by myself because I didn't want Dad's support, especially when that support ultimately comes from Grandma's wallet. But with medical bills stacking higher by the day, I'm starting to panic. I've already drained most of my savings paying the initial hospital fees, and soon I'll need more money, fast. Guys, honestly, I'm at my wit's end here. I genuinely don't know what to do, which is exactly why I'm opening up about this. The hospital bills aren't magically going to vanish, nor will this painful feeling of abandonment by my own father. I'm lost, anxious, and confused about my next step. All I know is that my savings won't hold out much longer, and if I don't figure something out quickly, my problems will be far worse than a broken leg. So, here I am, reaching out to you guys, hoping someone out there has advice for me. Please, if you've got suggestions or ideas, drop a comment below. I'd really appreciate your help. Update number 1. Hey everyone, Denise here again. It's been 5 days since my last post, and honestly, I'm relieved to say things are looking up, at least more than I expected. Initially, I really thought I'd have to face this whole nightmare alone, but it turns out I didn't have to. Thanks to your encouragement in the comments, I finally worked up the courage to reach out to my aunt, and to my surprise, things actually got better. When I contacted my aunt, I wasn't exactly hopeful. She's always been straightforward, the type who'd probably just tell me to toughen up and deal with my problems independently. But instead of lecturing me, she genuinely listened. I spilled everything about the accident, my dad's neglect, and how Stacy always came first no matter what. Shockingly, she was immediately sympathetic and offered support without hesitation. She asked how much I needed and assured me we'd get through this together. Honestly, I should have known better. She's always been stronger and kinder than I gave her credit for. But here's something else I totally didn't see coming. My grandma stepping into the picture. After talking to my aunt, word quickly traveled to Grandma Jean, who became absolutely enraged upon hearing what had happened. The next morning, she stormed into the hospital room like a hurricane, demanding answers and declaring how unacceptable it was that my father prioritized Stacy over his own flesh and blood. She took charge of the whole situation on the spot. Grandma Jean didn't even hesitate. She immediately sorted out the hospital bills and made it clear no one would bother me about finances anymore. Honestly, the relief I felt at that moment was overwhelming. It wasn't just about having the bills covered. It was the comforting realization that, for once, someone in my family genuinely cared about me. My father might have abandoned me for Stacy, but Grandma made it clear she'd never do the same. Right now, I'm feeling lighter than I have in ages. I hadn't fully realized how heavy the stress and loneliness were until someone finally lifted them from my shoulders. Grandma visits me every day now, bringing delicious homemade meals, keeping the nurses alert, and making sure I'm never alone for too long. It's reassuring in ways I hadn't anticipated, reminding me that despite Dad's choices, I still have family members who truly value me. But there's trouble on the horizon. Grandma is furious. She hasn't openly confronted Dad yet, but it's obvious. It's in her sharp glances and in the cold way she mentions his name. I've caught her mumbling angrily about his poor choices and his shameful neglect of me. Ever since Claudia showed up, Grandma never hid her disapproval, especially about how Stacy managed to manipulate Dad so effortlessly. Now that Stacy's schemes aren't just hurting me, but have also impacted Grandma directly, it seems she's finally reached her breaking point. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what's about to unfold. A big part of me dreads the confrontation looming ahead when Dad eventually comes back and has to face Grandma's fury, yet another part feels cautiously optimistic. Maybe, finally, he'll realize just how much damage Stacy's manipulations have done. Still, I've decided I'm not going to dwell on it too much. With Grandma and my aunt backing me up, for once, it feels like I actually have people I can depend on, people who genuinely care about my well-being. Update number 2. Hey, everyone, Denise here again. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and wow, a lot has happened. But not exactly as I anticipated. Shortly after my previous post, Grandma took matters into her own hands. She offered to let me move in with her, and honestly, I didn't even think twice before accepting. The day I was released from the hospital, Grandma showed up, ready to take me home. But that wasn't all. While I was recovering in the hospital, she'd quietly arranged to move all my belongings out of Dad's house and back into hers. I didn't have to lift a single box. It was like a weight lifted off me, knowing I wouldn't have to return to a home where I clearly wasn't wanted anymore. But here's the harsh reality check. It's been 2 weeks now, and Dad still hasn't even noticed I'm gone. Not a single call or text. It's as if I've vanished entirely from his life. At first, I admit, it stung deeply. Part of me foolishly hoped he might at least panic or feel some guilt once he found out I'd moved out without telling him. Yet nothing happened, not even the faintest sign he cares. As for Grandma, her anger towards my dad has only intensified. She's doing her best to stay composed around me, but I see right through her calm facade. She frequently grumbles about how disappointed she is that she raised someone so irresponsible, so selfish. I overheard her saying she never imagined her own son could become this kind of man, someone who ignores his flesh and blood for someone else's daughter. Right now, though, I'm focusing on myself. It's strange, but even amid all this chaos, having Grandma's fierce support has made me feel truly cared for. For once, I don't feel invisible anymore. I'm not exactly sure what happens next, but at least I have family who genuinely cares enough to help me figure it out. But Grandma isn't someone who lets things slide easily, and now she's gearing up to confront my dad head-on. Honestly, I know it's going to get ugly. Living with Grandma has been unexpectedly comforting, a huge shift from the constant battles and loneliness I felt at Dad's place. Here, I don't have to fight for attention or prove I matter. Even though I'm still recovering, the peace and genuine care I receive now are something completely new to me. Grandma's support has gone above and beyond. She's been ensuring I have everything I need and has even stepped in financially, almost like she's trying to make up for the neglect my father has shown me all these years. It doesn't erase the hurt, but it certainly makes it easier to cope. Right now, my main focus is moving forward. After much thought, I've decided to take a brief break from college so I can fully heal, not just physically, but emotionally too. It wasn't an easy call to make, but deep down, it felt necessary. I need the space and clarity to rediscover who I am outside of my dad's drama and Stacy's manipulations. With Grandma's unwavering support by my side, I finally feel hopeful about figuring out my own path. Update number 3. Hey everyone. I know many of you have been eagerly awaiting news about the big confrontation, and I'm sorry for the delay. It's been about a month since my last post, and let's just say, things got intense fast. I've needed time to process everything that went down, but I think I'm ready to finally share it all. Remember when I mentioned Grandma's plan to confront my dad? Well, she wasted no time at all. Just one day after my previous update, she called him over to her house. To say it was intense would be an understatement. Grandma unleashed everything she'd been holding back, confronting Dad on his irresponsible and shameful behavior. My dad immediately slipped into defensive mode, stubbornly justifying his actions by insisting Stacy's so-called mental health was far more fragile and critical than anything I was going through. What hurt most, though, was when he had the audacity to suggest I was partially responsible for the accident, claiming I had been reckless. It felt like a slap in the face. I was barely out of the hospital, trying to rebuild myself, and my own father was twisting things to blame me. Even for him, it was an unimaginable low. But Grandma didn't tolerate his nonsense. She delivered a crystal-clear ultimatum. Dad had to choose between his actual family, me, or Stacy. At that moment, Dad could have made amends, could have chosen differently, but instead, he laughed bitterly, dismissing everything Grandma said as ridiculous. He walked out like it was all just a joke, as if none of it mattered. I genuinely think he was too deep in Stacy's web of manipulation to grasp the seriousness of his choices or how much he stood to lose. For days after that confrontation, things felt unsettled. Grandma was waiting, maybe hoping Dad would snap out of it and realize how close he was to losing his family entirely. But he never did. He didn't reach out, apologize, or attempt to make things right. Instead, he simply went on with his life, utterly oblivious to the damage he'd caused, and unaware of how close he was to permanently severing the ties with those who once loved him most. We waited, giving him one last opportunity to realize his mistakes, but nothing ever changed. Finally, after what seemed like endless weeks of silence, Grandma had enough. She made the tough but necessary decision to completely disown my father, and that wasn't even the harshest part. She kicked him out of his home, too. What Dad had conveniently overlooked was that the house he lived in belonged entirely to Grandma. It was hers, so she had every right to remove him. She made it crystal clear. He and Stacy were no longer welcome there. After weeks of tense silence, Grandma finally acted. I think that's when the gravity of his actions truly dawned on Dad. He showed up at Grandma's doorstep later the same day, desperate, promising that he'd change, that he'd finally become the father I deserved. But it was way too late. Grandma firmly told him to get out and warned that if he ever bothered us again, she'd call the police. Yeah, it sounds harsh, but after everything that went down, it honestly felt justified. But that wasn't the end. A few days later, Dad appeared outside my college, waiting at the main entrance, looking broken and desperate. It was a pitiful sight, honestly. He seemed disheveled and lost, begging for another chance, pleading about how he'd lose everything if I didn't forgive him. The whole situation was incredibly uncomfortable, borderline frightening. I froze, unsure of how to handle him, terrified he'd drag me back into his mess. Thankfully, I gathered enough courage to walk away, and security quickly intervened before things got worse. After all this chaos, the last thing I wanted was to live in constant fear of him suddenly popping up again, trying to guilt me back into his life. Grandma and I both decided that enough was enough, and we needed peace. As much as it hurts to admit, he pushed himself into the situation he's currently in, homeless, drifting from shelter to shelter, and living on the streets. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this outcome. Do you think Grandma went too far? Would you have done anything differently? A part of me still feels guilty knowing he's struggling now, but after everything he put me through, maybe this is exactly what he needed to wake up. Leave your opinions below. I'd really appreciate hearing your thoughts.